Welcome, Outlaw. I have some links on the bottom of the description. Go ahead and take a look at them. You might be interested in them. Now go ahead and have a seat, and I'll start off today's story.
At 14, I finally found out why my mother abandoned my family. Written by Siggy Bojangles. I wish my father had told me earlier. There's no feeling quite like a loved one's betrayal, if you could call it that. I would. I had no choice but to help, because until then, I loved him. Maybe I still do. My family immigrated from Sweden in the late 1800s. The streets paved with gold enticed my ancestors like so many others. They made the trip by ocean liner, sitting in steerage for weeks because they had hope. Hope for a new life in the new world. And, as I know now, an escape from their home. They arrived in New York City and settled down in a town north of Buffalo called Williamsville. At the time, it had a population of about 1,000 people, and it's barely grown since then. A calm, everyone knows everyone kind of place where they could start anew. Our family lived peacefully in Williamsville for over 2 centuries. And now comes my chapter. My father grew up in this town just like everyone else I know. Williamsville doesn't get a lot of out-of-towners. He married my mother a few years before they had my brother. And 4 years after that, they had me. I don't remember what my mother looked like. Not anymore, at least. She left the family when I was 4. My father took care of us all by himself, taught my brother how to look after me, and when he trusted no one to take care of me, he went off to work. He was a construction man. Hard hands, weather face, and a booming laugh that lights up the room. Or at least that's what my brother tells me. No said that changed after Mom left. He tried to hide it from his sons, but Noah had a keen eye, even at 7. He said my father's laugh was never as genuine. His eyes were glassy every time he smiled, and there was sorrow in his voice no matter how he said he felt. Noah says the last time he saw Mom was the night she left. She was going into the car at night. Noah had gone to get some water and he saw her opening the front door. He asked her where she was going, and she froze, like he had caught her off guard. It took her a few seconds to turn around, and when she did not look at my brother the way a mother looks at her son, but she looked at him the way a person looks at a criminal. Fear and disgust. My brother said he'll never forget the last time his mother looked at him before she walked out of the door without a final word to her boy. Noah hated our mother for leaving, for hurting Dad, for hurting him. He told me that story when I was 10 years old. He said he wanted to talk to her one last time and asked her why she looked at him like that. My mother was not a distant person, and she loved us very much. But Noah says that on that night, our mom was not herself. With my father working all day, my brother became my teacher, my sitter, and my best friend. I began to love him more than ever. He taught me how to ride a bike, and play baseball, and talk to my crush. He was my father when Dad was at work. I remember when we were hiking one day in the woods near our house. A couple miles behind our town was a beautiful waterfall that was a popular destination for local nature lovers. It was the winter solstice, and we did not plan accordingly. While we were exploring the winter wonderland, there was a frozen waterfall. Night came upon us before we knew it. We were on opposite sides of the pond at that time. Noah told me to come back to him, as we needed to head home, so I sprinted back towards him over the ice. "Lucas, look out!" Noah yelled. I realized my mistake far too late. Ice had begun to crack at my feet. Sickening snaps that haunted my dreams for the week after the incident. My 9-year-old self had been taught what to do in this situation. But panic overwhelmed me, and I continued to step towards my brother. My next step broke through the ice, plunging my leg into the freezing water. More of my body began to slip into the frigid water when I felt a hand on my back, gripping my shoulders. Noah threw me across the ice with startling strength. I slid across to the safety of the land and turned to look at my brother. He jumped off the thin ice as it broke below him. He soared through the air and landed mere feet away from where I was sitting, shivering. As we made our way home, I asked him how he accomplished such a feat. He said it wasn't that big of a jump, and my young mind was exaggerating. He chalked up his bout of strength to adrenaline, saying that I was in shock. We agreed not to tell my father about what had happened. I wish I had been smarter then, so I could have seen that night for what it really was. A sign. At the age of 15, my brother was taken into the attic of our house by our father. I was watching television. I remember it was hours before they came down. The sun was falling below the horizon when that old wood door creaked open. I was startled. It had been so long, I had forgotten they were even in the house. Noah and my dad walked out into the living room. "What you talking about?" I asked. "Nothing." No reply. He sat down on the couch, staring off into space. "Oh, you guys were having the talk," I joke, but Noah didn't laugh. Noah always laughed at my jokes. On the night after Noah's 18th birthday, he and Dad sat me down at the table. My father started his story like this. "Son, I know that life hasn't been the best for us sometimes. And I want you to know that I love both of you boys more than anything. So I need you to listen to everything I say very, very carefully. I wanted to let you have a normal childhood before telling you this, but it's time. Dad, are you joking? I asked. His face gave me my answer. I turned to look at Noah. The same grim, saddened look was plastered on his face. In the old days, our family lived in a village in Sweden. A normal town, except for the rituals. It started long before anyone can remember, but nobody ever forgot. On the night after the winter solstice, the eldest sons of each family, between 18 and 30, were led to the middle of the forest. There was an old cave there. No one knew what was inside. Some people say they used to push murderers into the cave, force them to walk in. None of them ever came out. The sons were to sit in front of the face of the cave, stared into it. They were not allowed to speak. They were not allowed to eat or drink. And they were not allowed to move. In the morning, they all will be there, except one of them will be changed. None of the villagers, not even the boys themselves, knew who had been chosen until the summer solstice. That night, one of them will become Varelse, roughly translating to dark creature. The man will become an animal with a thirst for flesh, an incredible speed and strength. The sons will be locked in their barns or yards, and the creature will break out and roam off the forest and town for a night. No one dare leave their house at that time, because they will surely be slaughtered. In the morning, the Varelse will become that boy again, and their lives carry on. This man was now the host of the entity, doomed to turn every solstice until the age of 30, when another boy will be chosen. The men who turn say they remember every second of the night. They remember killing their sheep, deer, friends, or even family, and how they couldn't stop. Some men went mad after killing someone they love, but that was rare. Most people were able to stay safe, and after many centuries, it became less of a danger and more of a chore. Our people learned how to deal with the beast every time it returned. You may ask me, Lucas, why did none of the villagers ever leave? Well, that's what my great-grandfather thought of as well. He wanted a new life in America, but his family told him he couldn't leave. He did not listen. He took his wife and son, Algot, to the city in the night and took a ship to America the next morning. When they got here, they settled down in this town and built a house on this land where we are sitting right now. Life was good until the winter solstice. That night, a couple heard shrieks coming from Algot's room. When they got to his room, there was a hole torn in the wall, and Algot was nowhere to be found. They searched for over a day the next morning before he walked back into their home, naked, covered in blood. He told them that last night he had changed, that he had been chosen by the cave. Algoth's father said that was impossible, because Algoth had been part of the ritual, because he was only 16. But he cannot deny the facts. Algoth was a Veralsa. He sent a letter back home, asking his father for an answer, but he never got any reply. He then remembered back to his days hanging out with his friends from work, listening to legends from the men in the pubs. He remembered them saying one particular thing. "You know, you never can leave this place, 'cause then their whole bloodline gets cursed. Ah, you're full of shit hands. No, I'm a dead ass serious. Me mama told me when I was young. My great-grandfather made a grave mistake leaving our village. Whoever, or whatever started this whole thing, never wanted anyone to up and leave. They had to reap what was sown just like the other folks. But when our ancestors came to America, he took the curse with him. Now, Mjork for us is passed down through generations of our family and to our eldest sons when they turn 18. I love you so much, Lucas, and I hope that you can accept this and believe me, because let me tell you this, son, I am dead fucking serious. I sat silently for a minute, and then looked at my brother. Tears were streaming down his face. Took me a minute to take in what father had just told me, and what that meant about Noah. I'm ashamed to say I looked at him that night the way our mother looked at Noah the night she left. My father started again. Your mother, she left when I told her about it. I should have told her sooner, but I wasn't man enough to do it. I thought that once she was part of the family, she would be more understanding and accepted. I was wrong. I'm sorry that I did that to you boys. I'm so sorry. I looked down at the table, my mind going a mile a minute. I didn't believe it then. How could I have? What kind of a fucking father tells this to his sons at 14? 14! That was what he told my brother that day, years ago, when he came downstairs looking dead inside. He wasn't. There is something much worse than dead inside him. And I talked to my father and brother for over a month after that. I cycled from denial to heartbreak to anger. Soon I began to realize that my father was in between a rock and a hard place. He couldn't control this, and it wasn't his fault. He tried to let us grow up as normally as he could, and he cared for us. I remember how Noah was very short with my father for a while after he talked with my father. He had more of a connection to our mother, as I had been only a toddler, barely speaking, when she left. Thought it was just his rebellious stage as a teenager, but now I understand. It was Dad's fault that Mom had left, and I think that hurt him more than anything else. was quicker to forgive our father, but I couldn't help but feel that my life up until then had been a lie, that nothing had been genuine. I hiked up to the waterfall where I had been with my brother 5 years earlier. The snow-covered branches and frozen pond was now a lush forest surrounding an idyllic swimming hole. I realized that the night of the winter solstice so long ago, the incredible feat of strength from my brother, it all makes sense now. I got shivers down my spine, knowing what was in my brother that night. Every memory I had of him is so unsettling now. I began to head home as the sun started to set. I realized how late it must be. The summer solstice was 6 days away. My father took us down into the basement, cleared away an old lawnmower, and a folded table to reveal a small door in the wall. It led to a room no bigger than a closet. On the floor was a wooden trapdoor. My father told us that as our family always built our houses over this trapdoor, which was originally part of our great-great-grandfather's house, centuries ago. He opened it up and climbed down the ladder into the darkness and beckoned us to do the same. It was pitch black down there. That lit some torches lining the walls. The room had a floor, walls, and ceilings covering hardwood planks, with dirt and mud leggings through the gaps and holes. The room was ancient. In the middle was a brick structure, a bit bigger than a brick oven. That told us that it was a holding cell, a safe structure where Noah and the boys in our family before him would spend the night of the solstices, until the Varals returned to his normal state. He opened up the thick steel door, and Noah crawled inside. It was the day of the solstice, and the sun will set in under an hour. A horrid smell wafted from the inside of the chamber. Noah didn't react to it. He went inside and told his father to close it. We also put the deer carcass Dad had bought off a hunter in there with him, for Noah. You see, the Mjolk Varels needs to feed during the night, otherwise he will not go back to sleep. See you in the morning, Noah said, forcing out a chuckle. Darkness fell on our town with a malicious intent I had never felt before. My father and I turned on a movie. He turned up the volume so high that it almost hurt my ears. I asked him to turn it down. He said, "Just wait." It was an hour before I heard it over the TV. Shrieks of anger, an inhuman howl coming from the ground beneath our house. You have never heard anything like the shrieks that thing below our house let loose that night. They will cease for a few seconds, and then start again for almost an hour before once again stopping. We tried to drown it out with louder noise, but the horrible screams seemed to penetrate anything we listened to. I will often wake up in the night crying for the rest of my life, haunted by these shrieks. It was nearing 1 a.m. Those shrieks of Noah still piercing my brain. I tried to focus on the movie my father and I were watching, and I was able to tune them out for a little while. My father paused the movie and stood upright. It only took me a few seconds to figure out why. The shrieks had stopped. We listened for a minute. Seeing the fear in my father's eye, I stood up as well. I sorely missed the screams I had just minutes ago pleaded for God to stop. We waited a minute, silent, motionless for Noah's cries to return. But they didn't. Not for nearly an hour. My father told me to wait here, but I wasn't going to be alone for tonight. I followed him down to the basement, through the trapdoor, and into the room with the chamber. There was no visible damage to it. Nothing had changed from when I had been down there hours earlier. My dad tapped on the brick walls. There was no sound from inside. I stood behind my father as he slowly, carefully, slid the iron door open. He threw the torch inside the cell, and to our horror, Noah was not inside. The eviscerated deer was in the corner of the cell. It barely resembled an animal anymore. But what we were focused on was the hole. A tunnel through the back wall of the cell, continuing through the earth and going up towards the surface. All bricks had been ripped out of the wall, allowing the creature to dig up through the ground. Mjolkvares had escaped. My father was trembling in fear. I have never seen him so afraid. He sprinted up the ladder, up the stairs. We grabbed the guns from the basement and went into the backyard. We saw the exit to the Varelse's tunnel, towards the trees. Almost like a prairie dog's burrow, but bigger. Tracks led into the forest from our yard. Its feet must have been huge, over 2 feet long. My father was in tears as we hurried after the monster into the woods. This was not supposed to happen. This has never happened, my father cried. We have to find him before he kills someone. But what do we do when we find him? Do we kill him, Dad? What if he kills us? I said. My father slowed down, stammering. I don't know. We stopped to think. We love Noah, and even though we allowed him to escape, and it was our responsibility to get him back, we were scared. What could we have done? What could we have done? If we found him, he will either kill us, or we will kill him. And neither of us wanted to do that. We decided the only thing to do was to wait at home till Noah made his way back. Or at least wait to start our search till the next morning. I know our choice was cowardly. I know it was awful. But I will make it again if it meant we could see Noah again after that night. We're only human. I think you will all do the same for your brother. Or father. I only wish the rest of the night turned out like we planned. We began our walk back to our house. Neither of us said a word. Fear and sadness filled the air around us. I was staring at the ground. The old hunting rifle I hadn't shot in years quivered. I slowly began to realize something was different about the woods around us. There was no noise around us. The sound of the crickets and birds that I had barely noticed before were now replaced by a vacuous silence. The woods were never supposed to be this quiet. I looked over to my dad. He noticed it too. A piercing shriek broke the silence, and in a moment my father was ripped from the ground. So fast I barely saw what took him. The blur of gray, emaciated limbs hopped from tree to tree with my father's flailing body in its grasp. His screams only stopped when he sunk his teeth into my dad's neck. This was where I got my first look at Mjork Varhouse. His face barely resembled that of my brother's, and his pale gray skin almost shined in the moonlight. Piss rolled down my legs as I tried to aim my gun at it, but my body was frozen. I watched it eat my father in front of me, not seeming to notice me standing mere feet below him. When I finally regained control of my body, I dropped my gun and collapsed to the floor, dragging myself behind a tree. The sick sound of chewing and gurgling filling my ears as I curled up in a fetal position, praying that this was all a dream, crying uncontrollably. I woke up in the morning. Light penetrated my eyelids, snapping me awake. The woods surrounding me confirmed that the events of last night had actually occurred. My father's remains were strewn across the forest floor, attracting maggots and flies. I dropped to my knees at his side and embraced what was left of his corpse, holding him one last time. I don't remember how long I stayed by his side. It felt like hours. I did not want to face the reality of living without my dad, but eventually I knew there was nothing I could do. I knew I was still out there. I followed a trail of broken branches and blood to a ditch, where I found a second mutilated body, an unlucky hiker most likely. The stench of death only now hitting me. I vomited all over the ground. I looked past the body to see Noah, naked and passed out, covered in blood and feces, not his own. I ran over to him to find, to my relief, that he was still breathing. I shook him. Noah! He did not wake up. Noah! Noah, wake up! Noah, come on! Wake up! His eyes slowly opened. Then he shot upright, pushing me away. He screamed, feeling his body all over, and calming down when he realized that the Varals had left him. Jesus fucking Christ, he said. His voice was filled with agony and fear. I killed Dad. I just hate him. I hate Dad. I couldn't stop. It wouldn't let me. I'm so sorry, Lucas. He cried. Then he threw up, upheaving bits of bone, flesh, and fluid from his victims. Why? Why did you come after me? Why didn't you just let me go? I stared at him. I didn't have an answer. I don't know. I replied weakly. I hugged Noah harder than I ever had before. In spite of all that had happened, I had my brother back and I just wanted to hold him. We began to walk back home as the summer sun shone on our backs, high in the sky. It was a beautiful day. A family down the block from us found my father's body later that day. I had been nursing Noah back to health when the cops knocked on our door. They told us that our father had been killed. The cops had chalked it up to a bear attack. The officer was very kind. She hugged us and asked if there was anything she could do. I said no. I just wanted to be with Noah for the day. I guess Noah said that he wanted to be my guardian, since he was an adult, but he didn't have a job. So my best friend's family volunteered to take me, for the time being. Those few days were a blur. I barely remember what happened. I moved my stuff into the guest bedroom of Caleb's house, and his family tried to be kind. They tried to do their best, but they had no idea what to do about my situation. They thought I was in shock, and I guess I was, but not about the death of my father. A gray cloud of sorrow covered the town for the next 2 weeks. Noah spent most of my days with me, walking around town. We talked mostly about memories, about what happened next, about Dad. The police had tracked down our mother, who was now living in California, remarried, with new children. We were told that our mother had told them that she didn't want to see us. Noah got 2 plane tickets to California that Caleb's family insisted on paying for. We flew to Santa Clara and drove to my mother's house. I didn't know what to think about the whole situation. I wanted to see my mother, but it felt like we were going to meet a stranger. I didn't know what to expect. Noah stood in their yard for an hour before walking up to the door. He rang the doorbell. It was Chime, slow and cheerful. Our mother answered the door. The lovely smile on her face faded when she saw us standing there.
Hello? Who are you guys?
She said, but she already knew. Hi, Mom, Noah said. Our mother shook her head, beginning to cry.
No. I'm so sorry.
She tried to walk inside and close the door, but Noah snapped. He grabbed her arm. Our mother looked back in terror. No! Talk to me! Talk to me! You left us. You're a mother, and you left us. It's not our fault he kept it from you. Please! Our daddy's gone, and you're all we have left. You're all he has left. Noah was sobbing. So was our mother.
I can't!
She screamed.
You know what's inside you! You're a monster!
Then talk to him! Noah pointed at me. My mother's eyes changed as she saw me. She didn't fear me like she feared him. She still felt guilty about leaving me. He's your son. Take him. Don't punish him because you hate me or my dad. I could see that my mother knew Noah was right, but she still refused.
I can't. I just can't. I've moved on. You should too.
With that, she closed the door. I haven't seen her since. Both Noah and I finally went to live with my uncle's family in the city. We drove back with them after the funeral. I will always fondly remember the next 6 months I spent with Noah. I knew that the winter solstice was drawing nearer each day, but I tried to keep it out of my mind. I knew Noah will figure something out, and I was right. He woke me up in the middle of the night and said goodbye. He said he loved me and wished that he had more time, but he didn't. I thought that he was just leaving temporarily, but I never saw him again after he left. I told him that he had left to spend the rest of his life on his own. In a way, he did. I spend most of my time now thinking about how my life could have been different. Growing up with Dad, and Noah, and a loving mother. I hope there was a reason that this happened to us. But I guess there's no use torturing myself with what could have been any longer. Noah, Dad, I can't wait to see you guys again. I'm coming. Lucas Carlson, April 2nd, 2021. My wife and I were given a list of rules when our son was born. Written by Klung J1. My wife and I wanted a child early into our marriage. We wanted a child we could call our own. We tried time and time again to no avail. My wife couldn't get pregnant. We watched as all our friends had children while we were stuck with nothing. My wife didn't want to adopt like many of our friends suggested. She wanted a child of her own blood and flesh. As time went on, my wife became more and more depressed. She wanted a child so bad, and I felt guilty that I couldn't give her one. Eventually, my wife finally gave in, and we decided we were going to adopt a child. I tried cheering her up on the drive to the doctor's checkup before we went to the adoption center. She didn't even want to look at me. I could see out of the corner of my eyes that she was crying silently. When we got to the doctor's office, we checked in and grabbed the 2 available seats next to us. There was a man in the far corner of the room, and I could see he was staring at us. He had dark blonde hair with green eyes. He stared at me, and I got a weird feeling from him as I stared back. When we sat down, the man got up, and I could see he was at least 6'5" with big arms and a good build. He walked over to me and my wife and said in a dark, deep voice,
"Having some trouble, Mr. and Mrs. Roberts?"
My wife looked at him, then at me with a confused look on her face.
Sorry, do we know you?
My wife asked. The man chuckled and said, holding out his hand.
No, but let me introduce myself. My name is Kyle Waller, but I'm known to many as Lazarus.
We, not knowing what to do, shook the man's hand. I asked now, is there something we can help you with? The man looked at me and said,
It's not I that needs help, but you.
My wife, already being in a bad mood, said,
Look, creep, just tell us what the hell you want and leave us alone.
The man stared at her for a long time, and I could see my wife starting to shake now. He said slowly,
I know the troubles you and your husband have had trying to have a baby. What if I told you that I can help you?
We were silent now. I thought to myself, how the hell does he know we can have a child? I asked now after an awkward minute of silence. Who the hell are you?
I am a servant to a higher being. No, not God. It's the one you know as Satan.
I was about to speak, but the man shushed me and continued.
I know what you are thinking. I don't wish to hurt you, and neither does my master. We want to help you. We have seen the pain in this world, and we wish to cure it. I have been watching you closely, and have seen how much you both have been tortured. I simply wish to help uplift you of your torment, nothing more.
I didn't know what to say. I sat there unable to process what I was hearing. I looked over at my wife, who was frozen in place, unable to even look at me as she had her eyes glued on the man. He spoke again.
I know this may be a lot to take in, but know that I only wish to help you and this world.
He then took out a small bottle from his pocket. The substance inside was purple and had a little sparkle if you look closely. He then said to my wife,
I know how bad you want a child of your own. I have seen the restless nights you have experienced, and the hours you have cried in your bathroom.
He then held the bottle right in front of her face and said,
Drink this, and your wish will come true.
My wife stared at the substance. I was shocked when she grabbed it out of his hand. I spoke quickly now to her. Barbara, don't listen to this guy. He's crazy. That could be poison for all we know. We can have a child. Even if it is in our flesh and blood, it will still be ours. She thought for a moment, staring at the bottle before the man said,
It is your choice whether you want your own child or someone else's.
I panicked as she opened up the bottle and in a swift motion drank the substance in one gulp. I stood up, terrified as I saw her collapse on the ground. What the hell did you give her? I screamed as I ran up to the man and grabbed him by his shirt. He smiled before saying,
She is fine. Give her a day's rest and let the potion do its work.
I screamed and punched the man who didn't flinch. I could feel the bones in my hand break as I punched him. I dropped to my knees, crying out in pain. When I looked up, the man was gone. The nurses rushed over to my wife and me. I could hear them calling 911 on the phone. I ran to my wife, ignoring the pain in my hand. I put my head against her chest and I could feel her heartbeat. I sighed in relief, then whispered in her ear, You'll be okay, Barbara. Everything will be okay. After arriving at the hospital, the doctors took my wife and ran a scan on her. While doing so, they checked on my hand, which not surprisingly was broken. After being given a cast, they walked me over to where Barbara was being scanned. After the scan, the doctor came up to me and told me my wife was fine. She has no brain damage or any kind of damage, the doctor said. They put her in a room and suggested I go home and get some rest as well. I'm not leaving my wife, I said. I tried sleeping that night in her room, but I couldn't at first. What the man said was still in my head.
Let the potion do its work.
I looked over at my wife, who slept so peacefully, her breathing so calm and relaxed. I eventually somehow dozed off, and when I woke up, I saw my wife wide awake, looking out the window. "Barbara!" I said, rushing over to her. She looked at me, then smiled and said,
I heard you broke your hand. Are you okay?
She said. I'm fine. How are you?" I said. She smiled and kissed me when the doctor walked in and said, "She's doing wonderful." We scanned her again and we saw in the scan that she's pregnant. I don't know how, but she is. It's incredible, the doctor said in amazement. Congratulations. My wife hugged me and she started to cry. I was happy as well, but I was more shocked than anything. It worked. The potion. But how? Then I looked at my wife and saw how happy she was. You're going to be a father now. Be happy. The next few months were full of anticipation. Barbara was now full of life and happy again, and I couldn't have been happier myself. I never gave the potion or that man any thought during that time, as we were preparing for our baby. We fixed a spare room upstairs into a nursery and bought toys and a crib for the room. During the last checkup at the doctor's, we learned that we were going to have a boy. We painted nursery blue and fixed it up even more. We wanted it to be perfect for our son. As the days grew closer to the delivery, we started to get more and more excited. Finally, on a Saturday morning at 9:36 in the morning, Barbara's water broke and we rushed her to the hospital. I waited right by her room for about an hour before a nurse came out and let me inside.
Are you excited to see your son?
She asked in a cheerful voice. Very excited, I said. After letting me inside, the nurse walked out. No one else was in the room as I walked in to see Barbara, holding our son in her arms. He was sleeping when I walked in and woke up when I walked in. He didn't cry though, and I could see tears in Barbara's eyes as she was looking at him.
Our own beautiful son,
she said to me as I leaned in to look at him. Tears started to fill my eyes now as I said, "He's perfect."
do you want to hold him?
She asked. I would love to, I said. Barbara carefully put the baby into my arms as I stared into his eyes. He looked at me curiously with his dark brown eyes and puffy cheeks. He was small, but not too small. As me and Barbara were looking at each other and our new son when we heard a voice in the corner of the room.
Congratulations. I'm glad to see you both so happy.
We turned quickly to see the man from before with his dark blonde hair and glistening green eyes. We stared at each other for a moment before the man walked over and looked down at our son.
He's gorgeous. He's even got your eyes,
he said, looking at me. Yeah. Thank you for helping us, I said to him. He looked surprised as I said this.
Of course, I'm here to make this world a better place for people like you. You're probably wondering why I'm here, and I'll get straight to the point.
He said as he pulled out a crumpled letter out of his pocket. He handed the letter to Barbara and said,
This child will be perfectly healthy and normal, as long as you follow these rules in the envelope.
I knew it. I knew there would be some kind of a catch. Barbara opened up the envelope slowly and took out the piece of paper inside. We read the rules silently, in disbelief. Rule number 1. The child's name must be Lazarus, and he must never be called anything else. Rule number 2. Do not look at the child when it's eating. Rule number 3. The child must not go to school or interact with kids. He won't play well with them. Rule number 4. The child must be in bed by 10 p.m. every night. No exceptions. Rule number 5. On the child's birthday, he must remain in its room no matter what. Rule number 6. If you hear screaming from the child's room, ever, don't go inside. Rule number 7. If you see the child's eyes turn yellow, run out of the room immediately. Rule number 8. On the night the child turns 15, he must be chained up outside. If he isn't, may the Lord have mercy on your soul. Rule number 9. If the child somehow is not chained in rule number 8, you will have to kill it. We stared at the list in awe and terror. We then looked at our son. How can our son be this dangerous? Chained? Yellow eyes? What kind of madness did we get ourselves into? Barbara then looked up and said in a loud, angry voice to the man,
What the hell is this? Is this some kind of sick joke?
The man said in a deep, serious voice,
This is no joke. These rules must be followed, no matter what.
We looked down at the list as I said, Why? What did you do to our child? Did you curse him? I asked as we looked up and saw the man was gone. We were speechless. We looked at each other before Barbara took hold of my hand and said,
Dave, I think we have to listen to these rules.
Why? This list is so bizarre it can't be real, I said. She was silent before she said,
Dave, we have a child in our hands that the doctors told us we would never have. How much bizarre can this get?
She was right. I looked down at the rules again and sighed. Okay. Well, let's start with the first rule, I said. I looked down at my son and said, Hello, Lazarus. The child looked up as soon as I said its name and opened his eyes fully wide and started to giggle. Barbara and I stared at Lazarus before Barbara said,
Well, how hard can these rules be?
Lazarus grew up to be a smart and intelligent kid. Barbara homeschooled him and taught him well. By the time he was 8, he was already doing fairly advanced math and other subjects. We followed the rules with our lives. Most of the rules were simple. We always called him Lazarus, and we never looked at him when he ate. He was homeschooled and wouldn't live near any kids his age, so we never had to worry about rule number 3 or rule number 4 either. We didn't like rule number 5 because Lazarus started to cry and get upset that he will have to stay in his room during his birthday. He surprisingly never argued about the rule, but we hated that we had to lock him on a day that should have been celebrated. The only rule that became a problem was number 6. When Lazarus turned 12, he screamed almost every night. He screamed so loud it felt the house was shaking. We had to buy earplugs just so we could sleep at night, but even those didn't help. He screamed for about a month or 2 before finally calming down. After that, life went back to normal. I never experienced rule number 7, but Barbara did. One day when she was home alone with him in the kitchen, she turned to see Lazarus staring at her with bright yellow eyes. Barbara said she ran out of the kitchen so fast like her life was on the line. She had the feeling she was being chased, but she never heard footsteps behind her. When she waited a good minute or 2, she went back into the kitchen to see Lazarus reading a book. He looked up at her, and she said her heart stopped for a moment before she saw his eyes were normal again. Lazarus was a normal kid overall, and never showed weird signs of any kind. Once he turned 13 though, we noticed some things. They were small, but definitely visible. He got angry faster, and he seemed more aggressive with everything. He also started to growl in his sleep. A low but deep growl that woke me and Barbara up a lot. Rule 3 and 4 started to become harder now as Lazarus started to rebel against us. Why can't I go to school and hang out with kids my age? He would frequently in an angry tone. Because you can't, son. You wouldn't get along with the kids, I would say. That's bullshit, Dad. I just want some friends of my own. I want to be normal. I will never know what to say after that. I couldn't tell him about the list of rules because I knew he wouldn't listen to them. Rules were the last thing on his mind now. We started to become afraid as his 15th birthday started to roll around. I went to Home Depot and bought the strongest chain I could. When I brought it home, Barbara panicked, thinking it was too much for Lazarus to be chained up outside.
We already lock him up on his birthday. Now we have to chain him up like a dog outside?
Barbara said, yelling at me. We have to follow these rules. If we don't, I'm afraid of what will happen to us and him, I said in an anxious voice. She still wasn't happy. The whole week I would hear her crying in her sleep every night. I did feel bad for our son, but I knew and she knew what would happen if we didn't follow that rule. the night before Lazarus turned 15. He said to us as we were eating dinner, "Why don't we ever celebrate my birthday?" Barbara and I froze as we heard this. We knew this question would come up eventually, and we tried to come up with an answer. But we couldn't. Barbara spoke first.
Lazarus, just because we don't celebrate your birthday doesn't mean we don't love you.
Lazarus then spoke in an angry tone. "You didn't answer my question. Why the hell don't we ever celebrate my birthday?" Barbara was silent now. I finally spoke up. "We just can't, son. We can tell you why. And I know that may upset you, and we're sorry, but we just can't celebrate your birthday." Lazarus was silent before he spoke in a much angrier tone. "You can tell me why? That's your best excuse? Could you not tell me either while locked in my damn room the whole day?"
No, Lazarus,
Barbara said. "Screw you guys! I hate you!" Lazarus said, slamming his hand on the table before running upstairs. Barbara broke down now, sobbing uncontrollably. I tried to comfort her, but she pushed me away.
our son hates us, Dave, because of these stupid rules. It's not fair to us or to him,
she said as she ran upstairs to try to talk to Lazarus. I was alone now at the table. Tears also started to form in my eyes. I knew there would be a cause. Anyone who works for Satan is evil. He doesn't want to help this war. He wants to make it worse. At 11 that night, I went into Lazarus' room. I picked him up from his bed and brought him outside into the shed we had in our backyard. I tied the sheet around him and wrapped it against the table in the shed. To be safe, I also locked the shed door when I was done. I went inside and looked at the time, which now read 11:37 p.m. I went into bed and drifted off to sleep. I woke up to screaming from outside. I turned to my side to see Barbara was not in bed. I panicked and ran downstairs into the backyard. I saw Barbara on the ground, crying in fear. I ran over to her as she said,
"I'm sorry, Dave. I just couldn't leave him alone. I wanted him to know we care about him and that he's not alone,"
she said in tears. I turned to the shed, which was violently banging around. Then we heard the chain snap inside the shed. Oh no. Only a matter of time until he breaks the lock. I helped Barbara to her feet as we ran inside before we heard the lock snap off right behind us. We ran upstairs and into our room. We could hear Fat's footsteps approaching us. We looked around to see where we could hide and decided on our closet. We ran and hid inside just as we heard the door bust open. We could hear it growling as we saw Lazarus through the gap in the closet door. That is not our son, I thought. What I saw was a creature that resembled a goblin with a small hunch on his back and glowing yellow eyes. It was crawling on all fours and growling like a wolf. Barbara was shaking in fear as I held her close to me. She was sobbing, and I had to put my hand over her mouth to keep her quiet. The creature that was our son was crawling around the room, looking under the bed and all around. Its eyes then went to the closet. Please don't come here, I thought. The creature slowly started to crawl towards the closet. I could see its glowing yellow eyes staring almost right at me. I looked around and thought fast. I grabbed a couple of blankets on the floor and flipped them over me and Barbara. We heard the closet creak open slowly. We held our breaths as the growls started to get closer to us. We could see the face of the creature as it pressed it against the blankets. It got closer and closer, and we backed up as far as we could. Then, by some miracle, the face backed off and we could hear it crawling away into the other room. We were silent and didn't dare move. We were paralyzed with fear. Somehow we managed to fall asleep in the closet with the blanket still over us. We woke up and didn't move until we saw the sunlight outside. We walked out of the closet slowly and started to look around the house for Lazarus. The house was a disaster. Glasses and cabinets were broken and almost all the windows were shattered. We called out for Lazarus, but got nothing in response. We searched all day for him until eventually we called the police and reported him missing. We were heartbroken. Our son was gone, and if he came back in the form he was in, we will have to kill him. Our beloved son. That night, as we were about to go to bed, we heard a knock at the door. Barbara ran downstairs before I could stop her. I ran down right behind her, and when she opened the door, she stood still like a statue. I ran over to the door and saw someone I prayed I would never see again. It was the man, the original Lazarus. He looked down at us and said in a deep, hardened voice,
I gave you a child, and all I asked for in return was for you to follow the rules I gave you.
Neither of us could speak as we were still in shock. The man spoke again.
I am not here to punish you. That is not my job. I'm here to warn you. You broke the most important rule, and now you have let a monster into this world.
Barbara yelled at the man.
Why did you give us that list? You ruined our son's life. I know my son, and I know he's not a monster. He needs us now more than ever.
Did you not read the rules?
He asked in a calm voice.
Of course we did.
Barbara said.
You know what will happen then. That thing out there now is not your son. You know what you must do, and I hope you make the right decision.
The man then turned and walked away slowly. Barbara slammed the door shut and started to cry again.
I can't, Dave. I can't kill our son.
She said. We have to, Barbara. We messed up, and people will die if we don't kill him. I said. She looked down with tears in her eyes. Then she looked up at me and nodded slowly. We knew he would come back. We just didn't know when. The next day I went to the gun shop nearby and bought a shotgun and ammo. I knew we were gonna need it. We stayed up that night and waited by the door. There was nothing. We waited for hours and hours. By that time, Barbara was now fast asleep, and I started to drift off as well. Before I did, though, I heard a voice outside. Mom? Dad? I jolted wide awake now. He's here. Barbara woke up as soon as she heard the voice too and started to head towards the door. I stopped her before she opened it. That is not him, Barbara. Don't listen to it. She looked at me, then at the door, as we heard another voice outside. Mom? I'm cold. I want to go inside. I miss you guys and I'm sorry that I yell at you. It almost fooled me. I even started to reach for the door handle before reality kicked in and I stopped myself. Before I could even stop her, Barbara flung the door open. I pointed my shotgun, expecting to see the monster I saw a couple days ago. I gasped as I saw Lazarus. He was completely normal looking now. Barbara ran and gave him a hug. I sensed something was wrong though. Lazarus didn't even flinch or acknowledge Barbara in the slightest. He only looked down at the ground. Then, I saw him looked up at me and saw the glowing yellow eyes. Barbara, get away from him! I yelled, pointing the shotgun at the monster. Barbara didn't listen to me and continued hugging Lazarus and kissing him on the forehead. In a swift motion, the creature grabbed Barbara and bit into her throat. I heard Barbara try to scream, but she couldn't. Blood was squirting out of her throat as she crawled towards me.
I'm sorry.
She gasped before she stopped moving and lay motionless on the ground. I looked up to see the creature staring at me with its yellow eyes, then its smile, feeling its razor-sharp teeth covered in blood. I fired a quick shot at it and ran towards the backyard. I ran into the shed where I could hear the creature crawling right behind me. I made it into the shed just in time as I heard a loud bang when I closed the door. I held the door as I heard the creature banging on it. I tried with all my might to keep the door closed, but I couldn't. I then spotted a spare lock I had in the shed and quickly locked the door with the lock. The creature banged and banged. Slowly I saw the lock starting to break. No. It can't end like this. I started to cry now, knowing my fate was sealed. I then looked down at the shotgun and thought, if I'm going to die, I'm not going out without a fight. The creature gave another hard bang at the door before the lock gave out. I cocked the gun back and pointed it at the creature. It looked at me with its yellow eyes, glowing in the night. The last thing it said to me in a dark, raspy voice was,
"Let's have some fun, Dad."